Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life. Hey everybody, welcome back. On this episode, I've got Thea Van Syoc, known as Vanleethea on IG. Hopefully I pronounced that right. I know I got your last name right this time because I asked before we hit record, but hopefully I didn't mess that one up.
Just a little bit, okay.
Okay, well, yeah, forgive me. Well known in like the firearms social media world. Actually a really good shooter. I had her in a class lately and was impressed with how well she shoots. And also just someone who just generally trains hard in a lot of things. But before I ruin her intro for everybody, I'll let her go ahead and do it. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
I hate this part.
That's why I did that.
So hello, I'm Thea, obviously. I never know where to start. So maybe I'll start with, I started shooting in 2015, and I've been a really mediocre shooter ever since. I'm super into just anything really physical. So I love shooting, jujitsu, training in the gym, weightlifting. What else? I'm from Oregon. So I live in Nebraska, but I'm from Oregon. West Coast is the best coast. Kind of, not really. I guess it depends. Politics, no, but everything else, yes. I don't know what you want to say.
Well, so let's talk about it from this aspect then, right? Because I know that you started out just purely for like concealed carry and being a defensive shooter, and kind of that started your journey, right? So why don't you talk about that, how you got into it and how you got interested in it?
Okay, so I recently got interested in shooting because I wanted to be a competitive shooter. Because I've seen that video of Gianna Reeves, the 3-gun shooter, and I thought it was just really cool because I had never seen a woman do anything like that before. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. I want to do something that cool. So I originally started because I wanted to be a competitive shooter, but then it was later that same year, in another town not far away from where I'm from in Oregon, there was a shooting on a college campus, and it just pretty much scared the crap out of me and made me look at it from a different perspective. Like, shooting is not only like a fun sport, but that could be something that could potentially, save my life one day. So I got a concealed carry permit that year and started training from a more defensive type of aspect and revolve around like concealed carry sort of stuff. So I never actually made it to 3-gun. Still to this day, I still never made it there, but that's okay.
It's all right, because when you get right down to it, shotguns are for shooting a-holes with beanbags and hunting birds and opening doors. That's all they're really for now. So yeah, 3-gun's kind of passe anyway, so I wouldn't sweat that.
Thank you for saying. I feel so much better now.
Now that I've offended,
people are always like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" You said what?
Now that I've offended like half the shooting community, but it's all
right. They're going to come for you now with their pitchforks and shotguns.
So I got to tell you, like when we had you in the class recently, I was impressed with your skill level. You're obviously somebody that takes your training very seriously. And to be honest, that has not been my experience with a lot of people that are kind of categorized as firearms influencers per se, you know what I mean? And it was nice having you in the class because you can shoot, and you've obviously put a lot of time into it. And you're obviously a very athletic person. And that kind of dovetails into like my thoughts on firearms training that a lot of people kind of miss the crucial thing, right? Is that shooting is an athletic skill. For some reason, so many people think that the laws of training and performance kind of go out the window when you put a gun in your hand. And it's just not true. It's an athletic endeavor like any other, right? You got to train it like an athlete trains. And that was kind of the impression that you made on both my wife and I in the class, was that you were somebody that takes that very seriously. And that was nice to see. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they go hand in hand. And that's something that I've talked about before. And when I do, I feel like bring it up on social media, there's a lot of people who do agree with that, but then there's also the people who obviously get offended because they don't view it that way. And they're like, well, such and such can shoot really well. And I'm like, yeah, but such and such also gets winded walking up a flight of stairs. So,
well, and there's a difference between, so conditioning and athletic ability are related, but they're not necessarily the same thing, I don't think, right? Like you can be a highly trained athlete and be out of condition. Now you're out of shape, but your skill isn't gone, just your conditioning's gone. And because the conditioning requirements in some of the shooting sports have historically been low, people could get away with being poorly conditioned, but that doesn't mean they weren't good athletes.
Yeah.
They had the spatial awareness, they had the hand-eye coordination, they had the visual perception speed, they had like the mental aspects, the mental game, all those other things that are part of being a good athlete. They were just, maybe a little fluffy, right?
A little fluffy. That's a nice way of saying it.
But like there's other sports that are like that too. You can see that in other athletic endeavors that don't require a high amount of cardiovascular conditioning. These people are still good athletes. They just maybe not conditioned in that aspect, right? People conflate the two when they're really not. They're related, but they're not totally the same thing, I don't think.
Yeah. But I guess I look at it not from the aspect of it just like sport either. I do tend to look at it more from like a self-defense type of aspect. So for me and like my brain, I'm like, those things should go like hand in hand. But I guess, if you're looking at it from just like a pure competitive standpoint, then like, yeah, like you said, you don't have to have a high level of conditioning at all, obviously, because there's so many great shooters who don't, and it doesn't matter that much. But I think from like a self-defense aspect, it is really important. And those two things do, like the conditioning, the athleticism, the skill, all of that, I feel like has to be wrapped up together because I've seen a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I just got my gun, that's all I need. And it's like, okay, but what are the odds that you're going to need that versus being, physically capable is how I kind of view it.
Well, I definitely agree with you. I was thinking more just from the sporting aspect for that bit of the conversation.
Oh yeah.
Because that kind of, that's what those guys, either they're talking about that or they're the kind of FUD that likes to just stand still and shoot and doesn't understand that that's not what gunfights look like, right? So that could be part of it too. Yeah. But the thing, like you touched on something that's near and dear to me, because I used to argue this, like especially in like law enforcement circles all the time. Not so much on the military side because of what I did, but like in the law enforcement side, you had like two camps of people. Like you had the guys, and you had this a little bit in SF, but it's not as bad, right? It's not as polarized. But in law enforcement, you've got like the people that like to train are like in two camps. You've got like the shooters and the combatives people, right? And I'm like, but it's the same thing. It's a spectrum. It's not one or the other, right? If you don't have the ability to turn that volume knob all the way up and down on that scale, then having all the skill in the world at just one isn't going to help you, because you don't know what the fight's going to be until the fight happens, And like, I know you do,
exactly.
You're a martial artist, but like for me, shooting is just part of like the overall martial package, I guess is the best way to put it. That's how I think about it. And I think that having all the shooting skill in the world could potentially be useless if you can't fight your way out of a wet paper bag, right? And then the same thing's true, right? You could be the reincarnation of Cesar Gracie, but if you can't shoot and it becomes a gunfight, you might not be able to make it either. So I think you need to have some balance there, right? You have to have some understanding. And then like also like edged weapons or impact weapons, all these different things. And I'm not saying you have to be, a Filipino martial arts master or a BJJ black belt or a USPSA grandmaster. That's not what I mean, but you should be comfortable with all of those things if you're a defensive minded person, because you don't know what the problem's going to be until you're given the problem to solve. And if you don't have the tools in your toolbox and you're given a problem you're not comfortable with, you could be up the proverbial creek,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree.
So like how does what should you do first? Did you do BJJ first or shooting first? Which one came first for you?
I would say like I had dabbled like a little bit with jujitsu, but nothing serious. I would say shooting came first seriously before jujitsu did. Like well before jujitsu, I'd say shooting was a much more serious thing for me. It wasn't until, like I had dabbled and I'd done it like here and there, but I would have like big gaps in between with jujitsu. And I would say it wasn't until, this past year that I was really decided that I'm going to dedicate a full year and just go really freaking hard with jujitsu. Like I was doing it, like 5 to 7 times a week, like type of hard doing it, which, it wasn't very easy on my body, that's for sure. And then the time commitment, also was a lot, but I took it like to the point of where it's like, oh, I'm not going to just do it, recreationally in the gym. Like I'm going to do it. I'm going to compete. I'm going to like, kind of test my mettle a little bit and, see where I fall. So, shooting first, then jiu-jitsu, but, now I've kind of, gotten to a level with jiu-jitsu where it's taken a little bit of a backward. I feel like I'm not as, I don't know how to say it. Like, I feel like I'm definitely at a point where I'm proficient enough to where if it came to, like an actual fight, I think I could hold my own pretty well. I've definitely tooled people up in the gym who are my size and bigger. So I'm like, okay, when it comes to somebody who knows like no jujitsu, I'm good enough to where it's like, okay, well, I could, like get on top, I could hold somebody down, or I could put somebody in a compromising position. So I feel really comfortable with my jiu-jitsu that. Now, of course, there's a lot more. I have a lot more to learn. I've got a long way to go, but I'm at a point right now where if I needed to use it in a real world situation, like I would feel fairly comfortable doing it. But definitely not going to stop. Like I definitely have a lot more competing I want to do. I've got a lot more progress I want to make, but I'm at a point where I feel okay.
So what competitions have you done for BJJ?
So I've done, like submission only tournaments. I've done like regular, like this year I competed in with Jiu-Jitsu World League. The beginning of this year, I did Jiu-Jitsu World League tournament, which that's the biggest tournament I've done so far. There was like over 4,000 competitors there. It was crazy. I was just like, oh my God, I was like so overwhelmed because other than that, I'd done, just a couple of local tournaments here in Nebraska. So I did that this year. And then I also did, I'll say it was a few months ago, maybe it's been longer. My whole sense of time is just like so jacked. I did in the Jiu-Jitsu World League, I competed in the gi, and then I did a no gi tournament a few months ago, and I actually had to go toe to toe with a chick who almost qualified for the Olympics in wrestling. That really fucking sucked. That was straight up not a good time. And this was also the tournament where I was like, okay, no matter what, I'm not going to pull guard, like I'm going to work on like, cause I've been doing a lot of like wrestling. So I was like, okay, like this is the turn I'm going to freaking wrestle. And then what do I get? Like a legit wrestler. And I was like, fuck man, this sucks. But it was still good. It was a really good experience. So that was the first tournament that I ended up only taking silver. My other ones, I taking, gold. So that was my first one, but it was good because like afterwards she complimented me. She's like, that was some really good hand fighting and stuff. Like some of the best I've experienced. I'm like, well, that is such a huge compliment. Like I'm not even going to be mad about it. And then I've done like a submission only tournament and then just like another grappling industries tournament. So I've just done little things here and there, but it's still good, I think, to get out and compete, because I feel like that gives you a better sense of where you fall. And then, when you're like training in the gym, most of like people never go 100% when you're just training in the gym because nobody wants to get hurt or people have injuries. So that's one of the few times where you can actually like go balls to the walls, like nose to the grindstone. It's like you're really going to see how you stack up against other people because everybody's going 100%.
And I think like that's something I think is really important for all of it, right? For shooting, for fighting, for any of that, right? If you don't pressure test it, if you don't put it in the pressure cooker and see what shakes out, you don't really know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, like the kind of people we were talking about earlier, that kind of dismiss the athleticism of shooting, right? Well, part of that is probably because they haven't really put it to the test. It's one thing to shoot when you're comfortable on the range by yourself or with your buddies or in some kind of insulated bubble where you don't train with anybody else. It's very easy to get an inflated sense of your own ability, right?
Yeah.
And then when you put it up against people that, like you said, like she was an Olympian, or the first time you go to nationals for USPSA and you see what it looks like to see, like JJ Rakaza or like some of the top guys in person. Because it's one thing to see them on YouTube. It's another thing to like have them shoot the same stage you just shot and watch them shoot it.
Yes.
How was he 5 seconds faster than me?
It's like time doesn't apply to them in the same way it applies to us. It's so weird. It's like we're mortals and they're just something else, like watching people. And I get that just at our own club, just because we've got for how small our shooting club is, we've got a lot of like master level shooters and grandmaster shooters. Like it's really weird, but it's like every time I do it, I'm like, it's just like almost sickening to see like the gap in their shooting versus, just a regular person. It hurts.
I got to tell you about my first USPSA match. And I've told this story before, right? But I might have said it in class when you went to this. But so I had people tell me for years to compete. And I'd kind of been a little comfortably arrogant about it because, I was a Green Beret, I was a SWAT cop, I was all these things, right? And I was like, it's really cool and all, but that's a game. I'm a fighter, not a racer with guns, right? And my buddy Frank Proctor, who was one of our firearms instructors at our training detachment in my special forces group, who's a USPSA GM, he was like, every time I would shoot with everybody, like I was comfortably, probably, if not the best that day, I was up at the top, right? Except when I shot with him, or like a guy on SWAT named Pete Milionis, who's a GM, I was like comfortably the best around any of them, unless I shot with Pete. And they both like just ate my lunch. I'm like, all right, there's something to this. I got to go try this out. So me being me, because I have no ability to delay gratification. Like I can set a goal for the future, but like if I can do something right now, I'm going to do it right now. Like once I decide to do it, I just do it. You know what I mean? So I decided to shoot my first USPSA match in the wintertime in Illinois. Like a moron. So I found an indoor match up in McHenry, Illinois, which is like a far suburb of Chicago. Right. And it's a range. The range was really cool. It was like they had shoot house walls, so you could shoot out to 180. And they just had 2 bays, and it was like a key card access range. So they had an indoor USPSA match every other Wednesday night. They still do. And it's only like 20 shooters because it's just 2 bays and 4 stages, and they got to get everybody through on a weeknight, right? So I go and I'm comfortably pretty cocky about how I'm going to do. Like I'm not necessarily thinking I'm going to win because it's a game I'm not used to, but I'm pretty sure I can shoot probably pretty close to the way these people can shoot. What I didn't realize was out of 20 shooters, there were like 5 grandmasters and 2 of them were top 20 and 7 masterclass shooters. And then everybody else was really good because they were always shooting against these master and grandmaster level shooters, right? So I show up and they curb stomped me and stole my lunch money and left me crying in the gutter, sucking my thumb. Like it was brutal. And I just remember thinking, what just happened? Like what, how was that even possible that I got beat so badly? not realizing the level of competitors at the time, but it wound up. So I could have done like a lot of other cops and soldiers do and kind of dismissed it and let my ego rule and be like, that's a game. I know I'm good at my job. But I decided to set my ego aside because I knew that they could outshoot me, right? Didn't matter if it was practical or tactical or not, like they could shoot better than me. And I wanted that level of skill. So I just kind of, I went home and I cried for a couple of days and sucked my thumb on the couch under my whoopee. And then after that, I went back to the next match and that's history. Like I've been crazy about it ever since because it does make you better, right? And I guess kind of the point of the story for me, like you were talking about the people in your match and how good they are, is you don't really know how good is until you experience it firsthand. It's very, like if you're a cop and you just train with the guys on your SWAT team, or if, you train with the people in your unit in the military and you don't go out there and seek out these situations where you're letting it all hang out against the guys that are really, really good at this, you don't know how good you are. And that's like a problem with a lot of martial arts, right? Not so much BJJ because it's very, it's got a different mindset, but like a lot of the traditional arts have a lot of great techniques and a lot of great training, but they don't pressure cook them the same way. You know what I mean? They don't go out there and let it all hang out in a non-cooperative environment where you can really apply things at 100%, like you said. And it's easy to unintentionally lie to yourself, I think, if you don't put yourself in those situations.
Yeah. I mean, because you don't know what you don't know. So, like, if you don't know how good really is, and like you said, you're stuck in your own bubble and you're, the best, like, you're the big fish in the small pond, and you haven't been out in the ocean, like, how are you supposed to know? And I didn't even really think, I've never thought of myself as like a good shooter, I've always thought like I'm an okay shooter. But then when I really started like getting into shooting matches, I realized like how un-okay I actually like was. I was like, oh my God, like what the fuck? Like, because you're totally right. It's not the same. Like you can watch a video and watch somebody shoot and you're like, damn, they're good. But when you watch it in person, especially when it's on a stage that you already shot and you can like literally see the difference, it's something else. And I think that's something that every person who shoots, no matter what they shoot for, I think should try, like a match at least once, just to have like a more realistic idea of like what it is to be an actual good shooter. I don't think enough people do that. And I don't know whether it's like the ego thing, like they're too embarrassed, they don't want to let it all hang out, or maybe they're just too scared or whatever it is. Like I think everybody should do it. Like if you're a shooter and you call yourself a shooter, whether it's for self-defense or anything, like I think you should do it. Like try it.
Yeah, and I think people get afraid of their ego getting bruised, but then there's a flip side to it too, right? Like just like you don't need to be a black belt in BJJ to be able to defend yourself. You don't have to be a master in USPSA to be able to win a gunfight, right? Like I would say the average Green Beret is probably about a B class shooter in USPSA. So I mean, B class is nothing to sneeze at. You know what I mean? It's nothing to like turn your nose up at.
Yeah.
And I think that I think is a good like benchmark for somebody that wants to be a defensive shooter, is they should be able to perform at about that level. Because you can perform at that level, you're already better than 99.99999% of the human race with a handgun.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get in a gunfight with JJ Rakaza, right? That's not what's going to happen.
You would at least hope not. Could you imagine? That would be like the worst thing ever.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's not the person you're training to fight. You're training to fight somebody that at their best isn't going to be a B class shooter in USPSA, right? That's a skill level that people don't realize how rarefied that actually is compared to the general population.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people also don't have like, again, back just to realistic ideas, because like if I teach, like just like a basic handgun class, and you ask people like what they think their level of shooting is, and people will be like, oh, I'm an intermediate level shooter, or I'm an advanced shooter. And it's like, well, why do you think that? And they're like, well, because I've been doing this for like 5 years, or I've been doing this for like 15 years. And then you take them to the range and it's like they can't even handle their guns safely. And I'm like, where did you, like, what part, like, made you think that you were, like, an intermediate level shooter and you can even, like, handle your firearm safely?
So I got two thoughts on that. The two things, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's just been my experience, right? The two things that are always red flags when I have somebody come in my class, when they go, I've been shooting my whole life, and when they
Yep.
go, I'm an NRA instructor. And I'm not knocking the NRA credentials in general. I mean, you need to have some sort of credential if you're looking to be an instructor. I get that. But it's just like, so like the police world is bad about this too, right? If you go to a 40-hour course, you're a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
I always imagine Morgan Freeman standing behind them going, but in fact, he was not a subject matter expert.
Yeah.
40
Yeah.
hours doesn't make you an expert at anything, right? It's barely an introduction. It's barely an orientation.
Yeah.
That's just not the reality of it. If you want to be good at something, you got to spend a significant amount of physical and mental effort and time trying to be good at that thing. Otherwise, you're not going to master whatever that is. It's just not going to happen. And
Yeah.
not everybody's looking to master shooting, obviously. But like I said, I think about B class as a pretty good goal, because that's the thing. It's like Ron Avery said that was like black belt for USPSA. And I kind of agree with that, right? Not so much for BJJ, because BJJ, the ranks are a bit more difficult to get than in most martial arts. But in most martial arts, if you just keep going long enough and are like paying attention to what you do, you'll eventually make black belt and be pretty good at handling yourself within the confines of whatever that art is, right? And I kind of think B class is kind of the same way. If you go to enough matches and you spend some time dry firing and you spend some time live firing, like you'll get to that point eventually without having to go all the way down the rabbit hole and chase the dragon like I have. Like you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I do it because I love it. It's not like it's necessary. I guess, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I totally get that. Yeah. But speaking of that, like I'm like motivated to like shoot another classifier. Like at least sometimes I sort of see where, like where I would fall, because I shot like one classifier years ago and I was thinking about it. And that was one of the stages during that classifier. It should have taken like 12 seconds. And I had like 3 double feeds like back to back on that one stage, which really like fucked. And I think that might have even been my first stage. And so it just kind of like mentally fucked me for the rest of the day. Like after having that, it's like one of those things where you're like, what the heck? So I like talking to you and taking your class and shooting with you has really motivated me to like, take like another crack at it and see where I fall, but actually like maybe, dedicate a little bit of time like training for it and actually trying to progress. So, like this last year was my year where like jujitsu is like my focus, like everything else kind of falls to the wayside. And so I'm thinking this year, I think I need to circle back and do that again with shooting, just because there's so many goals that I have that I've wanted to reach and that I haven't gotten there. And I think now I'm just more mentally mature than I was, like several years ago when I first started shooting and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know what it is about it, but I just feel like this upcoming year is going to be a good year.
You should, you definitely should. And you're a good shooter. I mean, you shot really well in the class with us. It was cool to see.
Thank you.
You
Thank you.
smoked me on that one run, remember?
Yeah, I got really lucky, or you got really unlucky. I'm not sure which it is. Maybe it was I was really lucky and you were really unlucky, and those two collided.
And that's the other thing too, though. Like, and this applies, I think, whether you're talking about Olympic lifting or CrossFit or BJJ or Muay Thai or shooting or anything like that, right? Nobody wins every time. Like that's just not
Yeah.
the way of the world. Nobody wins every time. That whole invincible person is a myth. That's a Hollywood myth. It doesn't happen, right? Especially in training.
Yeah.
Like especially in training. You might be undefeated for like your pro record as a boxer or something, but that doesn't mean you were undefeated every night in the gym or on your way up in the amateurs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that
I know.
people lose sight of that. Like they're so afraid to fail But failing is part of the process. Like if you don't give yourself permission to fail, you're going to stagnate. You're not going to grow like you should. You've got to be able to just let that ego go and it's like, let it all hang out. Just do it. And if you fail, you just pick up the pieces like I did when they curb stomped me at the mismatch I talked about. You know, just
Yeah. And I think that's part where, like, when I say, like, I'm just kind of like more, I don't know, more mature. It's like, and we've talked about this before, like, I'm disgustingly competitive. Like, just, it's like disgusting. Like, I'll turn anything to a competition. I hate fucking losing. It's the absolute worst to me. So I think that's one thing that I matured. And that's one thing that jujitsu has kind of allowed me to do. It's like, you can't win every little battle in the gym. And if you're winning every little battle in the gym, then that says something about your training partners and that kind of stuff. Like, you're not pushing yourself, you're not trying new things, and you're getting stuck in a little rut. So I think to expand your abilities, you have to fail. And I think that's one thing with shooting that I'm going to do more this upcoming year is like push myself to fail. Cause I'll kind of always like rein things back in, but I never like just let the wheels fall off because it makes me like nervous. It gives me this weird little bit of like anxiety or something to do that. So I think that's one thing that I want to try and do this next year is really push myself, see where like my breaking point is, and then I can kind of reel it back in and, you know, train up to that. So that's one thing that I'm hoping to do this upcoming year is just fail more at stuff.
so I would say don't even rein it back in. Like when you're doing when you're pushing, not when you're working on on demand stuff, but when you're trying to develop new levels of skill. I personally think that you go to the failure point, not when it's totally a disaster, like not a dumpster fire, but when
Yeah.
you start to make mistakes and stay there and figure out how to fix the mistakes. Then you can push a little further and figure out how to fix the mistakes rather than
Okay.
otherwise you wind up doing this where you go faster and you start making mistakes. So you go slower. You go faster and you start making mistakes. So you go slower. But if you notice that sine curve never gets you any higher. So you got,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
right. And I had a thought about failure, right? So like when you're rolling, do you ever, because I used to do this all the time, and I wonder if you do this in the gym. If I was working with someone who wasn't as skilled as me, rather than just being like, just trying to, stomp them, right? Rather than doing that, because then neither of us are learning, I would intentionally put myself in bad positions and try to work back out of it. Because then
Yeah.
we're both getting challenged. You see what I mean? Like then they're
Yeah.
working at their level and I'm making myself be in a disadvantaged position and then try to fix it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of the same thought, but in a different context, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's something I totally do, you know, with jujitsu too. Like if I'm, you know, working with somebody who I'm like, oh, I could totally like curb stomp you. I'm like, well, that's not really fun to me because it's like, well, I know I can beat you this, and this way. And it's not, I'm sure it's not fun for them just to get absolutely smashed either. So yeah, to put myself in those compromising situations. So I guess for me, it's just figuring out how to do that with shooting. Like how to like what would be my like bottom side control for like shooting, you know, like and just
Find,
how to think about it that way.
find the point where you start making the mistakes and identify the mistakes and stay at that point. And then once you identify the mistakes, work on them in dry fire and live fire until you can fix them. But you
Yeah.
got to be able to identify the mistakes to do it. If you push so far that you don't even know what happened, you can't do that, right? You still got to be able to see everything, still got to be able to feel everything, and then figure out why it broke. What happened? What fell apart? What broke in my technique on that transition? Why did I drag the shot off? Was I not looking at the right point in the target? Was my timing wrong so that I was trying to time the dot coming onto the target with the trigger press, but the trigger press went early and I went just before the target. Like figure out, because those are mistakes you make when you go fast, like those sorts of things, right? Because really, with a few exceptions, for anything defensive or competitive like action shooting, the shot difficulty, with a few exceptions, in and of itself is not that high when you take away the time pressure, right? If you have all the time in the
Yeah.
world, that's why people that aren't serious love to shoot groups and nothing else. Because it's easy to
Yeah.
get good
Yeah.
at that when there's no time in the world. I'm not saying it's easy to be like a champion bullseye shooter. That's a different thing. That's not what I'm talking about. but you know what I'm talking about. The people
Yeah.
are like,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
oh, but my target looks like this. Yeah, well, that doesn't impress me, dude.
It took you 20 minutes to do it, so.
Like I said, I'm not talking about like champion bullseye shooters. Like those guys are on another level. That's a
Oh
whole.
yeah, that's a different level. Like the level of precision there, it's like, yeah, it's its own thing. But I know you're talking about. It's the people who are like, oh yeah, I'm a really good shot. It's like, okay, yeah, you're a really good shot, but it takes you, like 30 seconds for each one. So I don't know, like what that really counts for. Like, oh yeah, good for you. Because I mean, there's still people who it's like, even if they take like 30 seconds for a shot, like they're still not going to hit a bullseye. But
Yeah. Well, my favorite is the whole, like everybody loves the Wilder quote, right? Speed is fine, but accuracy is final. But the problem is they don't read the whole thing. The whole thing's like a paragraph long. And he talks about how you have to go as fast as your muscles are capable of and just learn to make haste slowly. He's talking about the mental aspect of it, not going fast, right? But everybody talks about it like, well, if I shoot slow and accurate, I'll win the fight. No, it is true that you can't miss fast enough, but it's also just as true that you can hit too slowly and still lose.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. Yeah, I think like another thing you keep bringing up, like mental, and I think that shooting is a lot more mental than I think a lot of people realize. Um, just like the whole mental aspect of it. Like, first of all, I mean, I guess there's so many things like going on at like once, like just a lot of things. And I think when you have like somebody who's like a new shooter or just getting a new shooter, like they don't realize it's like, oh, you're focusing on all your basic like fundamentals, but then there's all these like fine little minute like details and things that like go into it that can make those fundamentals better. I just don't even think people realize like how mentally, at least for me, I think shooting is very mentally intensive in that kind of like aspect when you're like actually trying to get better and you're trying to progress, like even just visualizing things. Like I'm sure you probably do it before you shoot a match or a stage. Like you're not only just walking through, but you're actually, when you're waiting to shoot, you're probably visualizing how the run's going to look and how you want it to look and how your shots are going to look, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that visualization is important when it comes to like self-defense too, because a lot of people have this preconceived notion on how a self-defense encounter would go, but I don't think people actually stop and like visualize what that could potentially look like or what different scenarios could really, like look like or be like. So yeah, I think shooting is very mental. Not many people really take that into account.
I personally think that shooting is the most Zen thing I've ever done, because the moment I try to make it happen, it falls apart.
Yeah.
Which is bad news for me because of my personality type. Because my personality type, I want to bend the universe to my will, right?
Yeah, and that's why I have the same personality. I'm like the same way. I'm just like, I will it happen, and then when it doesn't happen, I'm just like, I'm mad.
But like, it's like it's got to be. You've got to get to the point where the shooting is like this program running in the background of your computer. Like the window isn't open, but the program's running. It's got to be this subconscious thing. And I mean, you give your conscious mind a job to do, but if the conscious mind is trying to interfere with pressing the trigger and looking at the sights, it's going to fall apart under stress, right?
Yeah.
And I think
that's one of my problems is I'm such a control freak that, like I can, like if I'm just like shooting on the range or when, I was like shooting in your class, like I can kind of put it on the back. Well, I mean, when I was shooting in your class, there's like things where I'm like really consciously like trying to like work on, but I feel like if I'm doing other things, it can kind of be on the back burner. But if I'm like going to shoot a match, I'm like so just like I'm thinking about every little thing that I'm like trying to do, and I'm like, oh, I fucked that up, and then I start fucking up, and I'm like this inner dialogue of, oh, you fucked that up, you're gonna fuck up the next thing too. Like, don't fuck up this thing.
Well, yeah, one of the hardest things to do is to learn to let go, because there's always going to be something that doesn't go according to plan. Might be really minor. But even the best shooters in the world will tell you that something didn't go right on that stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've got to just like, once the bullet leaves the barrel, it's gone. You can't make up the time. You can't change it. All you can do is plug right back into the process and do your best from that point forward, right? There's no making up for lost time. And I think what happens a lot is we make a mistake. So we try to like push to make up for it on the rest of the stage, and we crash and burn because of it. you know? So that's a big part of it. And then like the one that gets me too, and this is like admitting a character flaw, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. The one that gets me is when I do really well on a stage, I tend to make mistakes on the next stage because now I'm like, oh, I got this. You see that last stage? I got this. I'm the next coming of Vanleethea. I'm going to burn it down. You know, and then once again, go back to Morgan Freeman saying, but in fact, he did not burn it down.
He did not burn it down. Yeah.
You know, so I think
I have that same struggle.
Bigger problem mentally is not doing well sometimes, you know? You just got to like let go of it all, let it happen. And like the visualization thing, like two things that I think about there, like the stages that I have in matches that are the best are the ones where I can literally close my eyes and see my sights lift on every target before I shoot it. I see exactly where the sight's going to be and watch them lift for each shot. And I can't always do that, but when I can do that, the stage goes really well, right? And then going back to what you were talking about self-defense, like for pretty much my whole adult life, I've played like this mental game, right? You know, because I had to be pretty aware for the things I did for a living. And some people would think this sounds kind of paranoid, but it's not like it's making you not want to do things, or it's making you be afraid to do things, or it's making you be like overly on edge all the time. But just when you go somewhere, play like a little mental game. What do I do if this happens? What would I do if that guy pulled a knife? What would I do if, you know, if somebody walked in here and robbed the place? What would I do? Where are the exits? Where's everybody sitting? What are my avenues of approach and egress? What can I see? You know, what cover do I have? And it's not like you have to spend a lot of time on it. Like I said, it'll be overly paranoid, and it shouldn't make you like, I'm not saying to be all wound up all the time. That's not what I mean. But treat it like a game, like a little mental game, right? Or like, I used to play a game that would like help with cornering and CQB, where every time I would walk around in public, I would try to make sure that when I walked around the corner on the street, I saw somebody else before they saw me every time. Like playing those angles, right? Learning to play the angles. And just make it like a little game. But when you do that, it gives you kind of this, sports psychologists call it chunking, where you make these little chunks of skill and awareness, and then you can assemble them like Legos or building blocks to solve a problem. And athletes, really good athletes, do it all the time. They have these little chunks of skill. And they can assemble the chunks in different ways based on what they're trying to address, right? So what you're doing when you play those games is you're making these little mental chunks of knowledge and tactics and skill that now I can assemble to address a problem when it happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah. I've never like heard of that before, but that's really interesting. I'm kind of the same way. Like I just think of things like that as it's like a little game that I kind of get to play with myself, and it's fun. It's like my own little secret game, and nobody knows I'm like playing it, you know, when I'm out and about. But it's still fun. It's not like a paranoid, like, oh my gosh, somebody walks in and they do this and they blah blah blah. I'm gonna do this. It's no more like a what if, and then there's this, and then there's that. Like it's, you know, not like a nervous paranoia thing as much as it is like just a fun little game.
Yeah, no, it's fun. And like, all right, this is kind of silly, but you're probably too young to remember this. But there used to be that skit where it was like, I'm squishing your head. You know, the guy would have the fingers. You probably don't remember this, right? Like it was like a camera view, and the hand would come in and be like, I'm squishing your head. I'm squishing your head. It was like a skit. It was like a comedy skit, right? So like when I would walk around the corner and see the other person first, I'm like, ha, I win. I beat you. Like it's a little game, like a little contest inside your head that nobody else knows you're playing, right? So it's not like it's this super serious, like, you know, super, you know, wound up, intense thing. It's not that. It's just this fun little game you play to get better at your awareness, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Yep. Right there with you with the little game.
Now you got to go Google I'm squishing your head. I'm telling you, it was hilarious.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. All right. Sure. Make me feel old. So let's talk about working out for a minute, because I know you're very serious about your time in the gym, right? And I know you've done CrossFit. You've done like Olympic lifting too.
Not CrossFit.
Nope.
Definitely not CrossFit.
Right. So
No,
tell me.
I did go through like a little like Olympic lifting phase. I never like competed or anything, but I just wanted to like learn the lifts, learn the techniques and stuff. And then I went through like a little powerlifting phase. And I think I hurt myself before I was going to compete because I did want to compete in powerlifting at one point. But I just went through like various like functional phases and stuff. Or if I got like a certain thing that I'm planning on doing, I'll like change up my training in the gym. But I think I started lifting pretty like seriously regularly when I was like around 19, you know? So it's been over a decade that I've, you know, taken the gym seriously. And even before that, I've just always been like super physical, super athletic. Like I grew up way out in the country, so we did like quite a bit of hard physical labor. I mean, like if we wanted to stay warm in the winter, we had to like cut and stack firewood like all summer, you know, just like stuff like that. But we had this like long hilly driveway, and I would run sprints on my driveway. I was like a freaking 8-year-old. Like I don't know what 8-year-olds are doing weird shit like that, but that was like me. Like I've always just been very physical like that. So yeah, lifting, I went through really different phases. And if I'm training for something, like I did the tactical games a few years back. So I switched up my training specifically for that. I did like a lot of aerobic, like heart rate training and conditioning, a lot of functional stuff to prepare for that. Or like if I'm prepping, like I try to just stay strong year round. My training's changed a lot because now I'm really big on just when it comes to injury prevention. So I try to be really careful because I've had a lot of injuries over the last, I don't know, probably like 6, 7, 8 years. Because I do a lot of stupid shit. So I hurt myself a lot. So I just change it up. Or like if I'm, you know, training for a jujitsu tournament, you know, like I always try and do aerobic heart rate training regularly, but then I'll add in like high intensity conditioning, you know, like a couple months before, maybe like 8 weeks or something before like a tournament to really just make sure I'm really well conditioned and stuff like that. But I just love to work out. I'm just like like if I go a week or two without working out, it's like my mental health like plummets. Like it's just I'm not a nice person. I'm a different person if I'm not in the gym regularly working out. So it's something that's really important to me and something that I will never stop doing like ever unless I'm just like physically incapable of doing anything.
Well, and speaking as the old guy with all kinds of injuries and surgeries, like I think there's always something you can do. You know, there's always,
Yeah.
and you just have to. This is going to sound bad. I'm going to turn people off from working out by saying this, but it's true. At a certain point, if you've led an active enough life and you've had enough injuries, you just have to stop caring that it hurts. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like if you just have to, because it's
No,
going to
you
hurt
really
worse.
do.
It's going to hurt worse if you don't work out. It's going to hurt worse if you get less mobile. It's going to hurt worse if you get less strong. So yeah, with all the injuries, sometimes I'm in a lot of pain doing it, but I know that the alternative is worse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I totally do know what you mean. Like I'm in pain like every day. Like every day something on me like hurts. But I still go to the gym. I still go run with my dog. I still do jujitsu. I mean, if I've got something that's like serious where I'm like I hurt my back a few months ago and that was like a pretty serious, I was like, ooh, I'm gonna take things a little bit easier, but I never just stop moving completely. But if I do take that time off, like even if it's just like 2 weeks off, when I come back, I'm like, oh my God, my joints feel like shit. Like I feel probably like I'm 20 years older than I actually am. Like it's hard to get moving again, but once you do, it feels so good, like so good, but it does hurt. But I feel you have to choose your hard, you know, like
yeah.
it's hard to be a lazy, weak, you know, incapable human, but then it's also hard to go to the gym and push yourself really hard. But there's a lot more benefits here because then you get to live a longer, healthier lifestyle if you just sacrifice for a little bit of pain.
Well, and like with my injuries, because I've had a bunch of surgeries and stuff, right? I know that if I stop training hard, I'm going to hurt worse. Like it's going to be worse.
Yeah.
Maybe not right away, but over time, it's going to be worse. So I'm just not going to let that happen. But I got a funny one to tell you. So when I was a kid, like I started martial arts at 8, right? And like all the old martial arts movies, all the heroes could do, you know, tumbling, could do gymnastics because it was, you know, it was cool in the martial arts movies, right? Of course, you do a backflip in a fight. That makes perfect sense, right? But remember, so I'm like, I got to do gymnastics. So we had gymnastics at my school, and I'm like 10, I think, at this point. because I've been doing martial arts a couple of years. And I'm sitting there, and the gymnastics coach comes out, and they're a bunch of like little 10-year-old kids, and he goes, "An athlete's life is pain. Get used to it now." And I'm like, what? But it's kind of true when you think about it, really. But I mean, there's people, I think, confuse real pain with discomfort.
Yeah.
And you never grow being comfortable.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of get used to that. You have to, and it's a cliche now, but it's really true. You got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable, or you're never going to be a better person, a better athlete, a better shooter, a better fighter. It's just not going to happen. I don't think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think the more hard stuff you do, I think the better person ultimately you can. Like, I feel like if you always stay in your little confines, you never have an opportunity to grow, whether that's like physically being stronger or just growing mentally, like as a better person. If you're always in your comfort zone, you're never gonna reach or attain anything different or better for yourself. So I agree. I think that goes for so many different aspects of life, not just the physical, but everything.
Like tying it back into that, one thing I've noticed because I'm significantly older than you are, right? One thing I've noticed as I've gotten older is that almost everyone I know becomes a worse version of themselves as they get older. And I'm not talking about the martial artists or the people that work out. That's not what I mean. Like just general people that I've met, right? And I think that comes from kind of what we're talking about, staying in your comfort zone all the time. That it's very easy to kind of lie to yourself and justify behaviors. And it's not like you become a different person, but it's like you become a worse version of yourself. Whereas the people that stay active in things that require not just physical effort, but mental effort, right? They become better versions of themselves as they get older because they're always working on themselves. They're always and if you can be objective about your abilities as an athlete or as a martial artist, or even just in the gym, just working out, it helps you be objective about yourself in other ways. And you don't get better without being able to be objective about your failings. So like, I think that kind of ties into what you're saying, right? You become a better person by always putting it on the line and telling, looking at yourself and being very honest with yourself. Like, because we've all had moments in our lives where we're perhaps not the best version of ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people can justify that, and then that kind of snowballs and they become worse and worse. Whereas a person who can be objective about it can go, hey, maybe I was in the wrong there, at least partially. Or maybe I didn't start it, but I could have handled it better, or I could have resolved it better, or I could have had a better outcome if I'd done this. And I think that you lose that ability when you're not always testing yourself in other ways.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard. I think it's also hard to like look at yourself in the mirror and try and do it objectively and point out your own inadequacies. It's really uncomfortable to do. Like it's it's not an easy thing to do. So I get why not a lot of people do that. Just like not a lot of people reach a super high level of, fitness or shooting capability, that kind of stuff. Because it's hard to look at yourself objectively, and it's hard to look at yourself, I almost feel like I have to like emotionally detach myself from myself so I can look at myself, and be honest with myself and say, hey, like you really sucked in that situation. Like you did not handle that at all. Like you need to like swallow your pride and your ego and apologize. Or, hey, like you really half-assed your workout today. You should have done better. Like, cause you pretty much just kind of wasted your own time because you were feeling a little lazy. Like, I think it's hard to do that. And I don't think many people can be honest with themselves in that sort of way.
But I think it's an important skill to develop if you really want to be the best version of you, And like, so how like in martial arts, people talk about kind of the spiritual growth and development from martial arts. There's a lot of lip service about that, but a lot of it doesn't actually happen. And I think that that only happens when you're actually putting it on the line. Like when it's like you talked about competition, right? When it's actually, when it means something is when you get that growth. You don't get that growth from being comfortable. It's got to be something uncomfortable. It's got to be something where you're really letting it all hang out there and kind of seeing how it shakes out to get that. And like I said, I think that your biggest improvements, both in skill and in self-development, I think they often come from the failures, not the successes, because that's when you learn the lessons. It's, you don't learn that much when you win. You learn a lot.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. Definitely.
Well, and so I got one more topic for you, and then we're already up on an hour pretty much. So how do you feel like these different modalities of training have complemented them, each other for you? Like, has the way you program your training in the gym influenced the way you organize your shooting training? Has the way you've learned BJJ influenced the way you think about combative shooting, or the way you organize your thoughts for shooting? How is this all kind of tied together for you? Because that's always something I'm really interested in when I talk to people about this.
Yeah. I would say I feel like all those things have kind of like helped each other. Like I would say like one thing with doing jujitsu, just like the level of focus, you have to have while you're doing it. Like you can't think about other stuff when you're doing jujitsu. I can't be like, oh, what am I gonna have for dinner tonight? What am I gonna blah blah? Because I'm gonna get like choked out. I'm gonna get armbar. Like something bad's gonna happen to me. And so I've kind of taken that into like my shooting. So when I do spend time on the range, like I really try to dedicate. It's like my mind is on shooting. It's not on the other list of things I have to do today. So I think like jujitsu has helped given me like just another level of like focus that I can achieve. So that's really kind of helped out with that. And then I think like lifting, and the fact that I've been doing it for so long, it's just taught me really like perseverance. So like if something's like hard or shitty or not going my way, like I just go to the gym, I do the work that I need to do, and I feel better after, like just by doing it, by pushing myself to do that. So that's kind of spilled over into like everything. So I think if I hadn't had that foundation built, my consistency with jujitsu probably would have like suffered a bit more, because there were so many times where I was like tired or worn out or just not feeling it. And I didn't want to go to jiu-jitsu. I didn't want to go train, because when you're feeling like shit, the last thing you want to do is go get freaking steamrolled, from the gym by other people. But having that lifting background has really taught me the perseverance, and that playing the long game is how you really get results and how you really make progress. And so that spilled over into my jiu-jitsu, and my jiu-jitsu spilled over into my shooting. And my shooting, I don't know what that's in right now. It's in freaking far left field. I need to get my ass back on the range. But I feel like all those things have gone hand in hand, and they've also all given me this other level of confidence. But I don't know. I mean, I'm in like this bubble. I've got this cool community of people, especially working at 88 Tactical. So I get to be around a lot of people who shoot, train, work out. They do all that stuff. But I feel like when I venture out of that bubble, it's very, very, very rare to meet people who are doing all those things, who are trying to be, not only proficient shooters for like self-defense, but physically, like their physical skills, whether that's like some sort of combat type of sport like jujitsu or Muay Thai or whatever it is, and then also being as dedicated like in the gym and training hard in the gym to make sure that they're physically capable. I feel like there's not really a lot of that out there. So I kind of take pride in myself for I don't know what the word is, but for committing to all that kind of stuff, and really like actually trying to progress in all of those things, and not being stagnant and all that kind of stuff.
I remember something. I can't remember which one of the guys it was, but it was one of like the big YouTube strength and conditioning guys, right? Might have been Mike Israetel. I'm not sure. but they said something about how the workouts that make you better aren't the really good workouts, and they aren't the really bad ones. The workouts that make you better are just that day after day consistency, moving the dirt, putting in the work, or where you really get the growth. The great workouts are good to like motivate you again. And the bad ones can kind of give you like redetermined dedication to not be like that, right? But the ones in the middle, the ones where all the work gets done. And I think that's kind of true for everything, it's that, because nothing matters as much, I don't think, for your training as consistency over time.
Yeah. I totally agree.
I know a lot of people, I've seen this in martial arts, I've seen it in shooting, I've seen it, in all kinds of things, that they'll work really hard for a little while and then they'll take a whole bunch of time off. They'll work really hard for a little while and they'll take a whole bunch of time off. Or like the self-defense shooter that thinks training is going to 12 classes a year, but not dry firing every day. You know what I mean? Classes are great, but that's not what makes you better. What makes you better is what you do day in and day out all the time, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you said it. That was one of the things you said during your class too. It's like the people who come and they just like take classes and they don't shoot again until they take their classes. Like, what's the point if you're not going to take the stuff you learned in class and apply it to your own training so that you can progress? And then the next class you take, you progress to another level, and now you can take new things from that class, apply it to your training. No, I think it's silly, but yeah, no, I totally agree. It's the day in, day out, monotonous, like just moving the dirt. Like, it's not fun. It's not always enjoyable, but sometimes it is. I've learned to find joy in the monotony, like with going to the gym and lifting. Like, I've learned to find like pleasure in that. Like, like who's the one who said that? Embrace the suck. Okay. But it's totally true. You just embrace, and I feel like I've found so much peace in literally just embracing the suck, doing the sucky things, because those are the things that have ultimately made me a better shooter, a better lifter, better at jujitsu, and just all around a better person.
There's a competition shooting trainer. He's got a podcast. He's real big on the mental game. The guy's name is Steve Anderson. And he had somebody tell him once, because he's like the original dry fire guy. He's like, I think I came up with the first dry fire books and I had the first organized dry fire routine. And he had this guy comment one time, like send him in a comment for his podcast where he said, what do I do? Dry fire is just too boring. I can't get into it. And I loved his response. He goes, you know what's not boring? Winning.
Yeah.
The people that get good at things, the people that are willing to put in the work. And the work, like you said, it can be fun. Like there's a lot of times, like I find almost a peace in my daily routine. Like I get up and I dry fire and I work out. And the days that I can't do that, like you said, I'm a little off the rest of the day because that's my normal routine. And I find like this kind of comfort in it, right? But the people that excel in anything are the people that are willing to put in the work. Not just the amount of work, but to be honest about the quality of the work too. I think.
Yeah, no, and that's whole nother level. It's one thing to put in the work, but then the quality of the work is also important.
Yeah.
Because you can go, I've seen this, like I've, talked to people, you talk to people who are like, oh, I go to the gym every day for like 2 hours. It's like, you look like you've never seen the inside of the gym. Like, what are you doing there when you go there for 2 hours, And I see that. I'm sure if you go to regular public gym, you see the people who are like, on the leg press machine looking at their phone and they're barely doing anything. Or, they take, 20 minutes between sets to scroll through Instagram and that kind of stuff. Like it's one thing to go to the gym.
The curls and the squat.
You said what?
The curls.
Luckily, I don't see that in my gym, unless it's like some, like power lifting who's like curling 225. Then I'm like, carry on.
That's different.
That's okay.
Different. That's all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's acceptable. It's like, I'm not going to tell you to get the fuck out of here. But, it's like the quality of that work too. And I think it's the same for shooting. It's like, okay, yeah, you can dry fire every day, but what's the quality of that dry fire? Or you can go to jujitsu every day, but what's the quality of the jujitsu you're doing? So I think the quality of the work matters just as much as the consistency of the work and the time you put into the work.
And I think all three of these variables matter, but the least important is the quantity.
Yeah.
Frequency and quality, I think, matter more than quantity. Somebody who dry fires for 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week, but it's really mindful and intensive and with a purpose, is usually better than the guy that does an hour a day and is all just nonsense, right? They're not being honest with themselves. They're not watching the sights. They're not really pulling the trigger right? And that holds true for everything, like, I go to the dojo 3 hours a day, but I half-ass it for 3 hours a day. That's not the same. It's better to go for an hour and do it right,
Yeah.
Or like we said, the people that, in shooting is the people that go to a class a month, but they don't do anything in between. Or like, I knew a guy once that went to every martial arts seminar that came through Chicago, but he didn't train in a dojo in between. I'm like, well, what's the point? Yeah, what's
the point?
Like, how does that even work?
That doesn't even make any sense. Like, you're gonna spend all the money to go to a seminar, but not actually
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe just going home and practicing what you got people at home. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
To me, that seems silly. It seems like a waste of time and money at that point to just half-ass things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at least how I view it. Like, if you're not gonna do it right or like put your all into something, like why even do it? I mean, I get there's like little hobbies, little stretch things like that, but that's different than it's like saying like, oh, I'm going to get really good at jiu-jitsu, or I'm going to be a good shooter, or I'm going to be super strong and well conditioned, and all those types of things. Like, that requires true commitment.
Well, and even like we said earlier, we're talking about how you don't have to be a black belt, you don't have to be a grandmaster, right? And that's okay. But whatever skill level it is you think you need to have, wouldn't you want to get there in the most efficient way possible?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Be smart about the work you put in. And like I said, I think that, like you said, the quality matters more than the consistency, matters more than the quantity. And I think quantity is actually the least important. I'd rather see smart work done frequently than sloppy work done for huge amounts of time,
Yeah.
All right. Before we wrap this up, tell everybody where they can find you and get a hold of you. Tell them about 88 Tactical and all the cool stuff you do. And let everybody know about all the fantastic stuff you're doing in the firearm space so they can come find you.
Okay. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Vanleethea. I don't do YouTube as of yet or any other social media, so you can find me there. Or don't. Either way, I won't be butthurt. So I work for 88 Tactical. It's this super awesome country club. We call it a country club. It's like a country club, but for guns and shooting. So we've got like a full bar, a restaurant, 3 indoor shooting ranges. So we got 3 ranges and 40 base total. We've got a 24-hour gym. We've got a bunch of freaking awesome training classes. Of course, like a pro shop. We just have so much. We got a speakeasy. We're working on getting a pool done. So it's like a one-stop shop, like everything you need. It's just awesome because it's like an awesome community where you can find like a lot of like-minded people, whether that's people who like to, train and shoot, or, people who just like to hang out at the bar and watch like football games on the weekend or whatever it may be. It's just fun to be around a lot of really cool, like-minded people. So 88 Tactical, look them up, especially if you're in Nebraska. They are franchising. I forgot what I was talking about. What else did you want me to say?
Well, as always, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for coming on. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Definitely give her a follow on Instagram. It's worth it. And the girl can shoot. She is not the typical influencer, so check her out. Thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.